All right, so I want to spend some time talking about Elder Scrolls because I've been playing a lot of it. And when I first heard about it, I knew that I wanted to do a video on it. This is going to be a discussion video. There are a lot of gameplay videos out there. And in fact, I think the best of all of them are the ones produced by Chip Theory Games. That's how I learned the game. And I recommend if you're going to pick up the game, or maybe you have the game and haven't gotten it to the table yet, that you check out the Chip Theory official videos on the game. They are extremely succinct and effective, I think, in explaining what to do, and kind of really got me to feel comfortable getting this to the table. I also want to thank Chip Theory for sending me this copy of the game. The couple of caveats on this video. First of all, this is a discussion about the game. It's not going to really show any gameplay. I'm going to look at this game from the perspective of how effective it is or not, or is not, in creating what I would describe to be an RPG-like experience. Because when I play board games, for the most part, I'm looking for the development of story, and I'm looking to feel like I am an actor in a world that is being generated organically by the mechanics of the game. And I've done a bunch of videos on the channel about other games I think that can do this very effectively, and one of them in particular is almost the opposite of Elder Scrolls, which comes in a massive box with tons of content and elaborate content, and that is Dawn of the Zeds, the Victory Point Games pizza box edition of that is the version that I have, and I did a whole video about how I think that is a really great RPG experience in a box, and that's sort of the framework for the discussion that I want to have in this video, because there is a lot of setup for this video. There's a lot of overhead and there's a lot of setup for this game, a lot of overhead with the game in terms of the rules and the actual mechanics of the each turn are pretty simple, but there's a lot to remember. There is a lot going on, and the question is, does all of that stuff generate the story? Does it generate a story? In the so that's one thing. The second thing is, I just want to point out in terms of the components here, these are not with the game. These are my upgrade chips that I purchased. I own not all of, but I've bought most of the content for Too Many Bones. So I am a fan of and a player of Too Many Bones. Those are the upgrade chips from Too Many Bones. They're not from Elder Scrolls. The Elder Scrolls comes with plastic poker chips for the health chips, and you can, I think there might be an upgrade, I'm not sure. So that's the second point. The third point is, I do not know the IP. I haven't played Elder Scrolls Online, the video game or the franchise. So this video is not going to have anything to do with that game, or how effectively this can translates that to a tabletop. That's irrelevant to the discussion, because it's been irrelevant to my experience of the game, since I haven't played Elder Scrolls the video franchise at all. So what I want to do first is, and this is actually not, this is from Too Many Bones also. I use this to keep track of if my character had gone or not. What we're looking at here in terms of these characters is kind of the end of a campaign. I played with two different characters, and I set out to build characters that were explicitly not only different from each other, but that did not use magic at all. Well, did not focus on magic, because typically I will go to a magical character, and I wanted to really see how I could develop a character without that. And so as the beginning of the conversation here, I want to say that the one criteria I have for how much a game creates a story and is effective at having emergent narrative, that is to say, narrative that arises from gameplay and mechanics, is the degree to which the character itself is a vehicle for interaction in the world in a way that makes a difference. So that would be, it could be anything from combat, which is like the default and sort of like the minimum to other ways of interacting with the world. And we're going to take a look here. This is my my wood elf knight, and my wood elf knight, I decided to focus on giving skills that would be kind of knightly type of skills. And so I focused on the social kind of aspect of the character to build up the character's speech skill. They were a ranged character, which is maybe not typically a knight. So we'll just that just it was the way that it worked out. And they had some heavy armor, but they were not focusing on anything concerning magic or sneaking around. They were I wanted them to be sort of bold and brazen and interact with the world in that manner. And then they were paired with this character that is a burglar. And I thought this was kind of funny because it was basically like a cat burglar. And that character had a little bit of magic, and they also had sort of like rogue-like kinds of things. They were carrying something that was close combat. They had some illusion skill that I was able to get, and they had the shadow skill, so they could be using their dice to manipulate themselves into stealth mode, for example, and to create illusions that would confuse the enemy and sort of fight in that manner. And indeed, in the gameplay through this campaign of the story, it did play out that they utilized their skills and felt very different when it came time for interaction with the world. The way this game works, you are choosing various quests to go on and adventures to have, and you have an option as the player as to whether or not you're going to have something that would say explicitly more combat or dungeon delvey heavy or not. And so you have some control over the environment from the outset. And I think that that is another real selling point of the game vis-a-vis its the degree to which it creates a feeling of a story. Because I chose a quest to go on that had me forced me to be successful to interact with the various towns in the province, I think it's called, or I can't remember, the area that I was in. And there are a bunch of different area maps for the game that come separately, and they each come with what's called the gazetteer that explains to you the specific overland mechanics of that area. And then it will this is like essentially almost the traveling town kind of thing that you may interact with. And then these are static towns and environments and villages that you may choose to go to, and they all have different things available in terms of interacting with things that might be a store for something you to buy, or a quest for you to pick up, or even an inn for you to rest at. So I was attempting explicitly from the outset of my 3-session campaign to minimize the amount of interaction I had that would be a traditional kind of, you're fighting an enemy either in a dungeon or, outside battle, let's call it, because I wanted to see, could I manipulate the game, or would the game support my choice of that? And indeed it did. It absolutely did, because I was initially traveling around the world. I did have some combat encounters, of course, it's a dangerous land, but I was traveling around the world for a majority of, let's say, maybe a third of the time at least that I was playing, and making choices, going to towns, making decisions about what types of items I was going to pick up, how I was going to build my character up, interacting with dice that come up, or trainers that come up randomly. So these would be available skills that you could potentially train by getting dice later on with your experience, but having access to these skills. Different towns will have different types of access. You don't necessarily know, you don't know what it's going to be until you get there, and slowly building your character that way, really modeling the concept of traveling around a world and having an interaction in a town and then gaining, I say experience here because that's not experience as a game mechanic, but experience as your character growth, that you can then use the experience that you get from later on from having certain battles or encounters or completing certain quests to purchase the dice that then become the things that enact the skills that you have. So in that regard, the environment does relate to your character and your character relates to the environment. So you have an impact on the state of the world, and more importantly, the state of the world has an impact on you. Again, that's a big check mark, I think, for feeling like you're having a role-playing game type of experience. So you do want to have like a sense of causation, I guess, is what I'm getting at, that as the characters move through the world itself is changing. And I think that is done very effectively here. The way that the quests are structured, you will, after you succeed in doing a quest, you have this, it's not like choose your own adventure, but you go to this entry, whatever that is. Now, again, that is pre-programmed, as it were. If you're successful in one thing, you go to another. So it's a pre-programmed tree. But the way it happens does feel organic. It doesn't feel too scripted, and it does feel interactive. And it feels like you're getting kind of a progressive revelation of the quest as you're getting more depth to your character. And that also extends to the decisions that you will make when you interact with the very many items that you can find in the town. And one of the things I really like about the game is that when items are available, it's a predetermined how many of what type. There's 2 different types of items are available. They're just, you can get them. So there's not money. You don't have to sort of buy them, or maybe you can't afford them. You have a limit of what you can hold in your hand in your backpack. But if it's there and you take that action, you can just get it. And I really like that because it lets you sort of focus on the higher level decision making of, do I want the effect of this item? Is this item going to support my character growth? And certain things, they're great things, but you leave behind because you realize those are not decisions or choices I made for my character. So I got it all mixed up, what was in the backpack and what wasn't. But we have things like some armor here, and there's a lot of food in this game, which I appreciate. We'll talk about that in a minute. This snout pie was awesome because you can heal for 4 HP. Lovely. And weapons and things. So nothing particularly surprising. I do like the various food items. They have a lot of flavor, no pun intended. But the decisions that you make about what you're going to do mechanically when you take that action in the town become very informed by the way you're trying to direct your character growth. So again, it's another thing that makes this feel like it's more like you're living in a world with your character, because you're acting as the player through your character to do different things with one character versus another character based on the choices that you've made and how your character has developed. So all of that, as mentioned, leads to a sort of sense of what I would call, an emergent narrative. And that emergent narrative comes from the core mechanics of the game, which really surround the character development and the use of these specialized dice to do different things, to make your skills happen in the world of the Elder Scrolls. The 2 points I want to make, these are just a look here at some of these are like a battle mat. This is a sort of a dungeon area, and you could see there are icons here that are going to direct you as to what type of loot you might put down or some type of an enemy. If you're familiar with the mechanics of too many bones in terms of how many enemy points, I think they're called, that come out to interact with you. It is directly related to the experience level that you have, that your party has. So you are fighting progressively more and more difficult enemies the more experienced you are. And of course, that's not new to this game, but it works very well. The other thing that works great is the enemy skills. There are just so many of them, and they're here. And in addition to the enemy skills, there's something called native skills. So for these specific units here at different places, they are going to have specific impact depending on where you are in the world. So there are certain enemies that are general enemies, and then certain enemies that are only in certain places. And the things that those enemies in those certain places do, some of them, the native ones, are related to that place. So again, it feels organic, it feels put together in that way. There is, I would say, more art on these location places than have an actual impact in the game. There are certain battles and things that do have obstacles, but for the most part, this is more design than actual gameplay impact. But, that's okay. There's so much going on here that it really doesn't matter so much. The other thing that I would say I wish the game had, it's a small detail, but when you're dealing with lots of enemies at a certain point, as you get further into your campaign, you get to decide after a certain point in what order they act. And it can be very difficult to remember once you're assessing like what all the enemy skills are and the best way to have them attack you. You come up with your order, and it would be nice to have like a little chit or something with a number on it that you could just stick on there as a reminder, because I ended up using some dice just from another game because I wanted to remember. I decided this guy's going to go third. I don't want to have to go through my whole rationale again to figure that out. But that kind of problem solving and that sort of planning, I guess you could say, well, it makes the game more of a pause. It's a puzzle to figure out moment. Yes, you're using your tactical, your skills in a tactical way, but it is very much you set up the battle, you're looking at all of the skills that they have, all of the skills that you have, and piecing together what seems like it will be a puzzle where you will come out on top. Now, whether or not that's like an RPG or not, I guess it's not, but that is a fact of the game, and it's very much, it feels like it has the bones, as it were, of Too Many Bones, because that's very much like what Too Many Bones is. So if you like that sort of thing, you're going to like this game. There is a fair amount of setup to each situation, and I'll just give you one example of when you get into a delve, when you're getting into an underground or a dungeon closed space area here, you're going to be pulling in a delve card that from a deck that you have pre-selected, and you will be having to kind of set it up. And there's a whole chart here for how you do that. So in addition to the multiple components, as with any game that's trying to create a world, I think of like Arkham Horror or something or Touch of Evil, where you're like setting up all these various decks, you have to build the environment in order to be able to go to the environment. And so the Delve deck is one of those. There are also decks that you set up with peaceful encounters that you may have along the way, or conflict encounters, I'm not sure that that's what it's called, that you have along the way of your travels. And again, that makes at the higher level, the mechanic pretty simple. You move, and if you land on a certain spot, you pull in a certain card, and then you deal with that card. You move somewhere else, same thing. All the while, you may be having individual characters may have side quests that they are trying to accomplish. I'm not going to really spoil this because I think a lot of the fun is just discovering what those side quests are. But again, when you're choosing your side quest, you can have the option. I found that there was enough variety to choose the kind of quest that your kind of character might actually go on. So you're not necessarily going to, if you're developing like a kind of rogue sneaky character with a little dagger, you may not have them go on some big grand side quest that's going to end in a massive battle or something. But maybe you would do that if you were developing a more of a stronger fighter character. And it seemed like there was a lot of variety there to make that type of selection possible. So I think overall, if you're willing to put in the time, it's a long game. The campaign, it's played in a sort of a three-part campaign, and I wish I had kept better track of time. I want to say like maybe 10 hours for a campaign with two characters, sort of also still learning the rules, maybe. Have to think about that. It's not going to be, it's something you need to commit to in that regard to want to be able to get out of it what you can. I think what you can get out of it is a lot. You really, or I really had a sense of who my characters were. And also, when I go back to the game to start over with a totally different campaign, totally new characters, there's tons of character choices and options between the races and classes, even alone, to build completely different characters and have a completely different experience. And I think that is also at the core of what makes this an RPG-ish kind of board game. And of course, it is a board game, because a tabletop game, we'll call it. I mean, there's no board. And obviously, the chip theory components and mechanics and the way they interact with each other really takes board gaming to a different place. But that, for better or worse, now is old news. But this does this to great impact and effect. And I just love the way the characters interact with the world, and the decision making, the kind of agonizing over what's going to happen when you're in town and what choices you're going to make and what skills you're going to develop, and then testing those skills out the next time you have an encounter and really seeing how they work. And that feels very real, and it makes the characters really come alive. And then by extension, it makes the story really come alive. So the rules complexity and the setup time is worth it, because it gives you as a player agency and the ability to perform actions through mechanics that impact the game state of the world in a really great way.